Hi everybody, it's Melissa from Welcome to the Woods. I have done so many different DIY countertops in my years and in my various houses. I wanted to compare and contrast them today. Who can forget my DIY epoxy countertops that were a bit infamous because I royally messed them up? Or how about my concrete counters that I did in the lake house remodel where I continued the micro cement finish across the counter and the backsplash. I'm also going to detail in this video a bit about my solid surface counters, which I have in my current kitchen as well as my bathroom on the main level of my farmhouse. And I DIY'd these myself. It was a huge undertaking and I did it with no experience. So if I can do it, you can do it. In this video, we'll compare and contrast these three different countertop materials, and I'm going to walk you through the pros and cons of each so that you can figure out what will work best for your DIY counters. Before we get started on the three types that I have personal experience with, I'd also like to just point out that I have never cut and installed my own laminate counters, and laminate is a very cost-effective choice. You can, in fact, DIY install yourself. This thin laminated surface for counters is very durable against scratches or stains, but if you have damage to your laminate counters, you might be out of luck. They're not really repairable. And so my only experience with laminate counters are when we first moved into the farmhouse and I didn't like the way that they looked, so I thought I would try painting them and then sealing them in polyacrylic. I did a faux marble paint job, and to be honest, it lasted such a short time. Counters take incredible use and abuse, and the materials that you pick for them should withstand that. Paint simply won't hold up to the heavy wear and tear. All right, let's revisit the issues with epoxy counters. Now, a lot of times when people want to refinish their existing counters, they'll paint it, and then if they're smarter than me, they seal it in something more durable, and usually that choice is epoxy. While I've seen so many tutorials online about how great epoxy can turn out, there's caveats that I discussed in my video I want to revisit today. The first major one is that it is very, very messy and must be done indoors. Originally, I tried to do my epoxy pour out in my garage, but it is such a finicky product. Epoxy has to be poured during specific temperatures. It can't be in direct sunlight. It takes a long time to cure, so any bugs or debris in the air can get into your epoxy job and ruin it. So you have to have a very controlled environment. If you're not removing your counters, you're doing the epoxy pour in place, your entire kitchen will be rendered useless and you'll have to do so much prep work to protect your cabinetry and such. The epoxy product I used for my countertop pour was rather affordable, and unfortunately that meant it was rather bad quality. Even though I picked something that had over 4-star reviews, it did yellow fairly quickly and it looked really bad. And so I had so many comments on my video sharing about it that said I just chose the wrong product and I needed to invest in a better epoxy product. But to be honest, all of the headache of actually doing the pour just wasn't worth it for me to try it again. When my epoxy epically failed, I did end up sanding it, painting it again, and then I sealed it in polyacrylic. But as I already talked about, paint and polyacrylic are not durable for countertop wear and tear, so that finish also chipped off, scratched, and looked terrible after only about a year. So I actually repainted my island counter 4 or 5 times before I recently built a more high-end kitchen island, and I at that point invested in a quartz stone countertop. So now I feel like I have just run the gamut of counters. I'm truly loving my quartz stone since we got it in May, so it's been almost a year that we've had it. And I love it. I totally see why people get stone. I definitely think far and away stone is the best choice for countertop material, but most people can't DIY that or don't have access to slabs for a good price. And mine was very expensive. It cost like $2,200. So it's not in everybody's budget. And that moves me to our next option, which is concrete counters. So when I did the concrete counters in the lake house kitchen, I did this because I wanted a continuous look from the counter to the backsplash. And I didn't really know how to achieve that unless I did this micro cement finish. It's called a microtech topping. And these products are from the brand Surecrete. DIYconcrete.com sells them and sponsored that process. So they actually sent me some people from their company to help pour the concrete into molds. And this particular kit is super, super strong and formulated so that it doesn't need like mesh reinforcements inside, which most concrete counters would have. I also think that doing it this way was pretty slick to keep the mess contained, and it didn't derail the rest of the kitchen. However, it was extremely heavy. When we took it out of the molds, it took so many people in order to lift up this huge piece of 2-inch thick concrete and lay it down onto our cabinets.
One of the most stressful things about purchasing homes, renovating homes, or even flipping homes is the financing. So I want to talk about an option you might not realize exists. Today's sponsor is Insta Lend. It's a hard money lender where you can get approved online for fast and easy home loans. Now, I know securing financing for a home purchase online can be a little intimidating, but Insta Lend is a trusted site that offers competitive loan terms, no upfront fees, and no prepayment penalties. Whether you need to secure financing to buy a home to renovate, or you are a seasoned landlord owning multiple investment properties, Insta Lend is an excellent choice because they have asset-backed mortgages, which means there's no income requirement, and there's minimal paperwork online. It just really streamlines the process. So you really can get fast and easy financing for what you want to do. You can explore Insta Lend's loan products, see their amazing reviews, and read testimonials on other people who've used Insta Lend to level up their real estate business by clicking the link in the description. If you are shopping for your next home purchase, be sure to consider them as an option. So now I'm in the Lake House kitchen with these gorgeous concrete counters and backsplash. I love the way that the finish turned out and that it's continuous. With concrete counters, you can pick a variety of finishes, colors, and techniques for application, but kind of once you mix it up, you can't really change it after the fact because the color is integrated in the material. Most people, when they're doing DIY concrete counters, will make a template on their existing cabinetry and then they will pour right in their kitchen with everything like masked off. And again, it's a ton of prep work because this is also a very, very messy DIY, and usually you have to have like mesh or rebar or something to reinforce the concrete. Like I said, this specialty product that I used was a little different. Each slab in and of itself is very strong and doesn't need reinforcement, but for the continuous look I was going for, where the micro cement went across the counter and the backsplash, as well as the fact that I have an L-shaped kitchen where two of the concrete slabs butt up next to each other, I did run into some issues. What I didn't think about is that concrete is very brittle. Think about it, whenever you're pouring concrete walkways or driveways, you always have cut lines that are like fault lines for when the concrete shifts and settles so that it doesn't crack. All that tension is released in the cut that you made. So with these concrete counters, when I'm trying to get a continuous finish, the two slabs themselves are stable, but as the regular temperature changes happen in a house and settling happens, the slabs will slightly shift and then the whole thing will crack. And that's what happened. I am seeing a big crack where my two slabs butt up next to each other, and I'm seeing cracks along where the slab meets the wall. Now, before I covered all of this in the micro cement topping, I did fill them with silicone. Like I filled all the cracks with silicone. And you can see I also did a waterproofing membrane on the drywall so that water transfer wouldn't happen, and this helps prevent hairline cracks in the concrete finish. I followed the technical instructions explicitly for these products, but what I tried to accomplish was just, I don't think, possible with these products because, like I said, no matter what, you're going to have these cracks where they pull apart. So the application here that makes the most sense for concrete counters are when you have one continuous slab. If you're doing like a slab for an island, that would look great. If you're maybe doing like a slab for a bathroom vanity, that would also look really good. And there are certain applications I think concrete counters make a lot of sense. Another thing about concrete to know is that it's naturally a porous material.
in order to make it so that it works for counters, you have to impregnate it with a specialty sealer. And like we've already talked about, there are not a lot of sealers that can withstand the wear and tear of a countertop. So this one actually came with a 2-part sealer, and I had to completely soak the concrete in it 3 times over. To protect against that water penetration on this porous material, I had to do a drop-in sink. So that's also something to be aware of. You can't really do an undermount sink with concrete without risking damage. I'll be honest that this kitchen doesn't really get a lot of use because it is the lake house's second kitchen. It's been used lightly for guests, but I think if it was a primary kitchen, it would be something to consider because you would have to frequently reseal the counters in order to make sure that you had a watertight finish you could actually wipe up stains and spills. That being said, I have not seen any discoloration since 3 years ago when I installed these counters, and the finish still looks as good as it did on day 1. Even with the light amount of use that this kitchen has had, I've noticed on the edges of the concrete form how it will crumble away slightly when something bangs against it or just from use. So I think that that brittleness of concrete as a countertop material can be a real negative. Regardless of the downsides that we talked about in this segment, these concrete counters are still the most aesthetically pleasing counters that I feel I've ever done, and I just really love the way they look, and I love the versatility as far as style and color that you can achieve when you go with concrete. Now we're in my farmhouse kitchen where you can see that I have my quartz counter on the island I was talking about earlier, and I have my solid surface that I fabricated myself almost 6 years ago in the rest of the kitchen. Now the reason I didn't splurge for quartz everywhere is because it's expensive. But I have to say I've been really surprised at how durable my solid surface counters have been over the years. Solid surface is not something people usually search up to do as DIY counters because fabrication can be kind of technical, but lucky for you, I have a very, very thorough tutorial on that on my channel, which I can link in my cards. Solid surface counters are sometimes referred to as Corian counters, the way that facial tissues are referred to as Kleenex, because Corian is the most popular brand of this style of counter. And it's uncommon that someone would try to source raw sheets of this material to fabricate them yourself, but you can. Before we get into the pros and cons of having solid surface counters in your home, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel, which is all about DIY home improvement, and hit that notifications bell so that you don't miss my next video. My favorite thing about solid surface counters is that they are repairable. So if I get stains on them, usually they come up with just a magic eraser, but if they don't, I can actually sand them out with a random orbital sander. Like here's a spot where I got rust from the bottom of my cast iron pot, and this transferred to my counter and I was able to fix it. This is also true for very shallow cuts that might happen in your counter. You can't cut very well into concrete counters, and maybe you can't cut into laminate, but you can cut into an epoxy finish. And so similar to that, most cuts you would make in a solid surface finish would be like surface level, and you can also sand those out. Solid surface, what it is 100% acrylic. It's basically plastic. So when you're fabricating, you're creating microplastics, and you have to be precautious cutting and putting all that dust. Same for when you're sanding it. When I sand my counters, you actually get to pick what finish you want. So I sand to 800 grit, and this gives me a matte look, but you can go way higher, 2000 grit, etc., to get glossier and glossier and glossier of a shine. With my solid surface counters, I was able to do an undermount sink, which is what I really wanted. I didn't want a lip for epoxy. I guess I don't really know if people have to do a drop-in sink or not, but I really wanted an undermount, so that was one thing that the solid surface option was a big bonus. I didn't do a perfect job on my solid surface fabrication. If I had had it done professionally, hopefully they wouldn't have blemishes like this, but I do have some visible blemishes on the front. So when you build up an edge to create the illusion that your countertop's very thick, you then take a router to smooth it all out and like cut it off flush. Well, mine had some pockets where I didn't put enough of the glue adhesive that's color matched to the solid surface material. So there's like gaps there, little bubbles, and those are visible. You can actually see the line where the 2 half-inch thick sheets of solid surface combine together, and you can see little bubbled gaps. If I were to buy more of that color matching glue, I could fill those, let it cure, and then rerouter it and fix it. But I just haven't gone through the work of doing that. And when I first fabricated these counters, it took me like 3.5 weeks to make them. Granted, I was a total newbie. If you're an experienced DIYer, you could probably do it faster. But it took me so long that by the time I was like done, I just didn't want to go through and do those tiny little modifications or those tiny little fixes. I just said it was good enough. When it came time to replace my counter in my bathroom, I also worked with a solid surface company so that I could get an integrated sink. Obviously, you can't cast something like this at home. You need a mold and stuff. And so, actually, I don't even really know how they do it, but I ordered it ahead of time, and they had like custom sizes, and then I had the integrated sink. So everything is cast out of solid surface. A benefit to solid surface acrylic counters is that it's the same material all the way throughout. So there isn't like a finish on top or a laminated sheet like laminate. There isn't a sealer that you have to replace regularly or reapply. It is just the material. So it's watertight, and if you're going to sand it and repair it, you don't need to do anything else afterwards. In this way, I can refinish my counters and revive them when I want to take the effort of sanding them all down and make them look as if they were just installed yesterday. You can also modify the thickness on these per 1/2 inch. So the strength of the solid surface sheet is a 1/2 inch thick. Well, you can have a 1/2 inch counter, you can have a 1 inch counter, you can have an 1.5 inch counter, you can have a 2 inch counter, etc., etc. If you go up by increments of a 1/2 inch, you can make it work just by building up the edge to give the illusion the counter is thicker. And I love that because you can get a really custom look. And in my kitchen, I chose 3 layered up together to make an 1.5 inch. It's very common, and that's kind of a more modern style of counter. But if you're trying to match the thickness to, say, stone, then you can get that, like, I think this is exactly 1 inch, and you can get that look, that thinner look if you want. Versus like for concrete, a lot of times it has to be a certain thickness, because if it's too thin, it's more susceptible to cracking or failing. I covered a lot of points in this video, but I'm sure there's so many more. So if you have experience with one of these countertop types that I talked about, let this video be a resource for others by commenting below your thoughts. Are there pros or cons that you want to share about epoxy counters, concrete counters, solid surface counters? And I'm curious, after hearing my points, you can tell my preference would be solid surface. Would you ever give it a go? Would you ever try fabricating solid surface counters? If you've watched this far in the video, it must mean you really like me. So I want to invite you to my second channel I just launched with my husband. It's tangential, sort of, because it's about being an influencer, but it's the financial aspect of my business. I have been a content creator for more than a decade, and I have large followings on all the 4 major social platforms. My husband helps me as my accountant. Once upon a time, he worked for a marketing agency, and at the height of his career, he reached the terminal position of CFO and CTO. He is so knowledgeable about taxes, investments, retirement, insurance. So utilizing my experience and his expertise, we wanted to start publishing content, financial advice specifically for influencers. So if you are growing your channel, if you are interested in learning more, then be sure to find our channel linked in the description. It's Finance for Influencers. That's all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll catch you again next time on Welcome to the Woods. Bye-bye.